So thanks for being with us. I am sitting in my multi-purpose room here in Staunton, Virginia. That's spelled Staunton, but it's actually Stanton. And that is the hometown of the American Shakespeare Center, which operates the world's only recreation of the indoor playhouse that Shakespeare worked in, the Blackfriars. The Blackfriars is an indoor space, and that operated while Shakespeare was still writing his plays. And we can look at how working in that indoor space transformed the way that he wrote some of the scenes that he wrote. Direct address, the art of audience interaction that we've been trying to figure out since we opened, well, actually, since we started as a touring company way back in 1988. This whole idea that audiences are in the dark and that actors perform for them on a stage and don't see each other is a fairly new idea. It only really arose with the invention of the light bulb, and really even then didn't catch on until movies. And that's when theaters started to compete with the film industry. And they did that by turning the lights off on the audience. And therefore, the actors could no longer see the audience and interact with the audience. But at the American Shakespeare Center, we leave the lights on. We even have a T-shirt that says, "We do it with the lights on," because of course, that's funny. So we do it with the lights on because we think that that's how Shakespeare was writing his plays to be performed. And all of the staging conditions of Shakespeare that we embrace, we do to explore his plays and see if they make a difference for our modern audiences. This is an image of, well, the only image that we really have that survived from Shakespeare's day of a theater. And this theater is called the Swan. And I have to tell you that it's not the most reliable image because it was actually drawn by a person who then sent it to a friend who then redrew it. So all of it is influenced in a number of different ways by perception. But what we do see is that there are galleries surrounding the stage, and there are even people sitting above the stage, which is something that we do. What we don't see is any sort of fourth wall. So there really wasn't an option to pretend that actors couldn't see the audience. So we think that Shakespeare actually worked with that and made that something that was special. So you can see at our playhouse, our audience sits on the stage in what we call gallant stools. Those are not arranged in the way that we think that they might have been arranged during Shakespeare's lifetime. We think that they may have been spread all over the stage, but they are an opportunity, as you can see, Ben Kearns taking every advantage of it, for actors to have a actual relationship with the audience that they're talking to. The Globe, too, has a chance for the actors and the audience to really engage with one another with eye contact and with well, what you'll see tonight. So we do it with the lights on. Universal lighting means that actors and audience are in the same light. And it was definitely something that Shakespeare did because it's very difficult to dim candles or sunlight. So we do it as an artistic choice to see what we can learn by doing the plays these ways. And it's a big deal for everyone because of brains. And I'll tell you more about that. First, though, I want to answer what must be troubling some of you. How can we know that Shakespeare was thinking about audiences and actors interacting? That seems sort of ridiculous. This is a scene from the first part of Henry VI. And it is late in the play, as you can see. This is the scene in which Suffolk is bringing Margaret back to the King of England, Henry, for her to marry the king. So Suffolk has found her in France and is bringing her back to meet the person that she is going to marry. Turns out, though, that Suffolk has kind of fallen for her in the time that he has been moving her from France to England. And in this scene, the only two people on stage are Margaret and Suffolk. So we have to ask who they are talking to. And we're going to see what the answer to that is in this video clip.
Say, Earl of Suffolk, if thy name be so, what ransom must I pay before I pass? For I perceive I am thy prisoner.
How canst thou tell she will deny thy suit before thou make a trial of her love?
Why speakst thou not? What ransom must I pay?
She is beautiful, and therefore to be wooed.
She is a woman, therefore to be won.
So we can see in this moment that he can't be saying those words to her. So who else does he have to talk to but the audience? And we're going to see this continue to develop as the scene goes on, with Margaret getting frustrated by him not talking to her and not seeming to listen to her. And then she will follow his lead.
Wilt thou accept of ransom? Yea or no?
Fond man, remember that thou hast a wife. And how can Margaret be thy paramour?
I will best leave him, for he will not heed it.
There, all is marred. There lies a cooling card.
He talks at random. Sure, the man is mad.
And yet, annulment may be had.
And yet I would that you would answer me.
I'll win this lady Margaret. For whom? Why, for my king. Oh, Tosh, that's a wooden thing.
He talks of wood. It is some carpenter.
Yet so my fancy may be satisfied and peace established in between these realms. But there remains a scruple in that too. Though her father be king of Naples, Duke of Anjou and Maine, yet is he poor, and our nobility will scorn the match.
Hear ye, Captain, are you not at leisure?
It shall be so. Disdain they ne'er so much. Henry is youthful and will quickly yield. Madam. I have a secret to reveal.
What? Though I be enthralled, yet he seems a knight and will not in any way dishonor me.
Lady, vouchsafe to listen what I say.
Perhaps I shall be rescued by the French, and then I need not crave his courtesy.
Gentle madam, give me hearing in the cause.
Tush, women have been captive ere now.
Lady, wherefore talk you so?
I cry you mercy. 'Tis but quid for quo.
When we look at a play on the page, what we are seeing is the interpretation of an editor who has decided when the asides should happen. And I imagine that the last time that you looked at a play on the page, that showed something that was a few asides every once in a while, but not as often as it could actually happen. So what happens in the Blackfriars Playhouse when all of these moments of interaction are occurring between an actor and the audience members that he is talking to or that she is talking to is that their eyes come in contact with one another. Direct address is audience contact. And one of our team members, Leah Wallace, actually did her work on what happens when our brains engage with another brain through eye contact. And what she found was that there is a social neural network that activates when we make eye contact for between 4 and 7 seconds. So the 4-second mark, your brain begins to talk to your body about the significant relationship that you are having with the person that you are in touch with. And that radiates out to the other people who are in the room in sort of concentric circles. So it's more intense for the people closer to you, and then it drops off a little bit. But the experience is one of intense community because we are sharing an experience. So the actors at the American Shakespeare Center make note of this, and they make sure to use the phrasing of Shakespeare's plays to encourage that sense of community. And I will have to say that there are times when eye contact that is made longer than 7 seconds, it just gets kind of creepy and weird. So there's a fine balance to doing this, but that is the kind of magic sauce, if you will, of working with audience interaction. So what's that mean for us? It means that when you see a play that is performed with the lights on and the actors take that into consideration, then you become part of the play, and the actors can start to play to you as another character who is helping them to tell the story. And what we're going to look at today is just how that interaction works and how we use that interaction to do the storytelling of the play. So this is a scene from The Merchant of Venice. It's very early in the play. In this scene, Portia is complaining to her lady-in-waiting, Nerissa, about this situation that her father left for her before he passed away. And this could be 8 minutes of two people talking about other people, or it can be a chance to kind of catch the audience off guard, or in the case of Shakespeare's theater, on guard, as they are watching the early moments of the play.
What warmth is there in your affection toward any of these princely suitors that are already come?
I pray thee, overname them, and as thou namest them, I will describe them, and according to my description, level at my affection.
First, there is the Neapolitan prince.
Aye, that's a colt indeed. He does nothing but talk of his horse, and he makes it a great appropriation of his own good parts that he can shoe him himself. I have much feared my lady, his mother, played false with a smith.
Then is there the County Palatine.
He doth nothing but frown, as you should say. He hears very tale and smiles not. I have actually the bone in his mouth and either of these. God defend me from these two.
How say you by the French lord, Monsieur Le Bon?
God made him, and therefore let him pass for a man.
So what we see happening there is that the audience then begins to embrace this convention and becomes a part of the story in a way that is really engaging. And as that begins to happen, you can see that after 1, after 2, it becomes clear that perhaps there's going to be more, and I could be on the next round. So then you watch the show in a different way, which is a really exciting part of being at the ASC. There wasn't any difference, but I'm thinking that there might have been a difference in the way that you thought about the play and who could be cast in it. So The one that we just watched, was called assigning. There are 3 basic types of audience contact that we've identified with the help of one of our actors. Actually, the fellow that was in the first photo that was on the slide, Ben Kearns, helped us to put these together so that we could teach them to other actors, to the students in our master's program, and then share them with audience members like you. So what we've identified is assigning and allying and asking. And then there's another level which adds the thing that the fellow in the last bit just did. He actually was activated to respond by pushing his hair back. And that was an exciting moment for the audience and for the actors. So first, we're going to talk about assigning. We'll do this by looking at some various scenes from the canon. Henry V is on stage right now at the Blackfriars Playhouse. And this is one of the ones that it's really easy to identify. Henry V would have had to have around 5,000 people to go into battle at Agincourt, but in the Globe, he would have around 3,000, which works out really nicely for not having to pay additional actors. If he just turns out and takes it to the audience and says, "We few, we happy few, we band of brothers," then suddenly he has the reinforcements that he needs. And that also brings the audience into this story. We see this too in the Roman plays as the plebeians in Titus and in Coriolanus and Julius Caesar all they are all addressed during that. So that is a large group casting, if you will. I'm taking you who have bought tickets to the show, and I'm actually making you part of the show in a way that is helpful to me. It could be a specific character, it could be a visual aid, or it could be an object, and we'll look at all of those. So in this one, we see Theseus talking to the audience or to Hippolyta, and he could take this all to Hippolyta, but he could also let it be to the audience. Do I have a volunteer who might read this for us? You can just unmute yourself and speak up.
Kirk, do you want to read this?
The lunatic, the lover, and the poet are of imagination all compact. One sees more devils than vast hell can hold. That is the madman. The lover, all is frantic, sees Helen's beauty in a brow of Egypt. And as imagination bodies forth the forms of things unknown, the poet's pen turns them to shapes and gives to airy nothing a local habitation and a name.
So, thank you so much, Kirk. That was lovely. What I am suggesting is that Theseus could turn to Hippolyta and say all of these things. But as we saw in the last scene in Merchant of Venice, he could also find a person in the audience who looks like a lunatic, or whom he happens to know from the pub down the road and wants to make fun of or make laugh. The lover, he can find another audience member to make the lover. The poet, again, perhaps it's someone who's attending his play that he happens to know writes sonnets. And the madman, and all of these are wonderful for us to see identified. And in our minds, they then become those people for the play. And so we get to see how we get involved in a different way. So that is assigning, another example of assigning. Now this time, I'm going to ask you all to underline when we might assign an audience member to be one of these people. A woman who is fair, a woman who is wise, a woman who is virtuous. And what is a funny joke that you can do with the virtuous one is you can look around and not find one who is virtuous. So you can make it into something with the ability to do this work with the actors. So the next section is allying, and this is just exactly what it sounds like. It's when a character is speaking to another character, and that character happens to be an audience member. So what we're talking about is when we are sharing a secret with an audience member that the other members of the cast or the other members of the company are not privy to, or sometimes they can hear us, but it's something that is the actor is using to get someone on their side. So what we see in Helena is that everyone has exited the scene and she is left alone on stage. So it is the basis for all soliloquies in our approach. And when Helena is there alone on stage, rather than taking it to herself, she is actually speaking to the audience and letting them know how upset she is by what is going on. Lo, she is one of this confederacy. Now I perceive that they have conjoined all three to fashion this false sport in spite of me. So she's letting her emotions show to the audience and they respond in turn. We often hear a lot of ahs and sad little sounds when Helen talks about being as ugly as a bear, because that is to the audience. She's making eye contact with the audience at that moment. We also have Iago, who is a master of doing the sharing with the audience, the allying with the audience, until the end when he stops and he kind of loses his hold. But he talks to the audience about how he is going to hoodwink Othello and how he is going to make his plan come into fruition. And this is one of the examples of that. What's really interesting about Iago is that he doesn't really lie to Othello until the fourth act. He's just pushing Othello into these different beliefs and telling the audience that he's going to be doing it the whole time. So he says, I'll do this. I'll pour this pestilence into his ear, that she repeals him for her body's lust, and by how much she strives to do him good, she shall undo her credit with the more. So we get that plan of action coming in. And then we have this one. So after we saw the assigning that we could do with Benedict, when it comes to Act 4, Scene 1, and we have Beatrice alone after her cousin has been accused of adultery, essentially of cheating before her wedding, they are finally thrown together in a moment of absolute openness. And we hear Benedict say, I do love nothing in the world so well as you. And that all makes perfect sense to take to Beatrice. We're not arguing that everything in a play has to go to the audience, but when we know that he has said that one woman is fair and one woman is virtuous, and that he has denied that he will ever want to get married or fall in love, it makes some sense for him to take that last phrase to the audience, that he was just telling that information, that he was just swearing he would not fall in the same way that Claudio apparently has. So I do love nothing in the world so well as you. It's not that strange. Can be making an atonement for how he has fallen into the path that he denied would ever happen. Then we have the next section, which is asking. And when we're talking about characters who are asking, it could be any time that you see a question mark in any Shakespeare. And that should change the way that you read Shakespeare, the way that you see and understand who the characters are talking to. So Oberon could be talking to who? No one, because Puck is not there anymore. He sent Puck away. So he could ask himself, but who comes here? but he doesn't need to tell himself that he is invisible. So if he takes it to an audience member, then we have this lovely little moment of interaction where the audience member could tell him Helena or Hermia, and then we can move on from there. He is invisible and will overhear their conference is also a form of allying, because he's letting them in on information that he's not told or that the other characters have not heard. So we get combinations of these across the canon. This is one that happens in the first quarto of Hamlet. The first quarto of Hamlet is a earlier print publication of the Hamlet that we are familiar with, that most of us studied. In this version, it's about 2,000 lines shorter, and there are different turns of phrases. For instance, to be or not to be, that is the question, becomes to be or not to be, there's the point. And in this scene, which takes place right after Claudius, the character of Claudius, the king who has taken the throne from Hamlet's father after he murdered him, we see a moment between the son whose father's ghost has told him that he must seek revenge, and the stepfather whom he must seek revenge on. And this is the first time that they've encountered one another since Hamlet confirmed beyond the shadow of a doubt that Claudius did in fact kill his father. And it is his first time alone on stage when he could take on the admonition that his father has given him to get revenge. And so he enters onto the stage, and Claudius is in prayer, it appears he is, and he has a chance. His moment has come, and he can walk up and just take that life as Claudius apparently did to his own father. So Hamlet walks on a stage, and this happened in a production that we did of Q1 in 2007. And he turned to a student at a student matinee who was sitting on stage right, and he said, "And shall I kill him now when he is purging of his soul?" to that student. But he didn't say no yet. He just held the eye contact with the student, and the student responded, "Absolutely, he has to die." And then our actor, Ben Kearns, playing this part, realized that Shakespeare has given him the text to respond to that young person or anyone who responds. He said no, which was a perfectly appropriate response. And then he says, if I kill him now when he is in prayer, then his soul will rise to heaven. And I don't want that to happen because he didn't give my dad the same chance. And of course, I'm paraphrasing, but that's the gist of the speech that follows this question. So when our Hamlet turned to that young man on stage right, he was able to persuade him. And the young man raised his shoulders and put him down, shrugged and said, and just nodded his head that he could actually leave without having to actually kill the actor playing Claudius way early in the production. So that is a moment when we see questions actually doing a lot of work. Another Hamlet moment that comes up quite frequently is when Polonius is counseling Reynaldo on how to address Laertes when he arrives in France. And he's talking, and then suddenly he says, "By the mass, I was about to say something. What was I about to say?" And our actors will turn to an audience member and say that to someone on the gallant stools, which has one of two effects. Either that's one of our graduate students who has the play memorized and they give him his actual line, or it's someone who didn't expect that to happen and they look like a ghost in the headlights. And Reynaldo finally comes in and tells him what he was about to say. So both of those work. because we can get back on track with either response. And we find that when Shakespeare is writing these plays with these questions in them, frequently any response that an actor gets can be managed, which makes for this experience to be much more improvisational and much more engaging for the audience. Now, I do want to say, for some of you, this probably sounds like a terrifying experience at the theater if someone is turning to you and asking you what their lines are. That shouldn't give you cause to fear, because the folks who really want to be asked questions will sit in the gallant stools or will sit close to the front of the stage. And if you don't want to be called on, the actors recognize that, and they will choose the folks who are making eye contact and are really engaging. So we have another scene to show you. And this one is, you're going to notice Alison Glenzer is on all of these, and that's not because I planned it that way, but she's just very good at this work. And what you're going to see here is a scene from Two Noble Kinsmen. I know I'm using a lot of rare titles tonight, but they're fascinating examples of what can happen. In this scene, the jailer's daughter has just realized that she's fallen in love with one of her father's prisoners, and she wants to do something for him. So she starts to ask the audience what they think that she should do. And she actually gets a response. And I'll tell you more about that after we watch it.
Why should I love this gentleman? Oh, 'tis odds he never will affect me. I am base. My father, the mean keeper of his prison, and he a prince. Ugh. To marry him is hopeless. To be his whore is witness. Out upon it! What pushes are we wenches driven to when 15 once has found us? First, I saw him, and I seeing thought he was a goodly man. He has as much to please a woman in him, if he pleased to bestow it so, as ever these eyes yet looked on. Next, I pitied him. Oh, and what wench would not that ever vowed or dreamed her maidenhead to a young, handsome man? Then I loved him. Extremely loved him, infinitely loved him, and yet he had his cousin as fair as he. But in my heart was Palamon, and oh, there, what a coil he keeps. To hear him sing in an evening, oh, what a heaven it is. And yet his songs are sad ones. When I come in to bring him water in the morning, first he bows his noble body, then salutes me thus. Fair maid, good morrow. May thy kindness get thee a happy husband. Once he kissed me. I loved my lips the better 10 days after. Would he would do so every day. He grieves much, and me as much to see his misery. What should I do to make him know I love him? Say that I venture to set him free.
That would work.
What says the law then? That's much for law.
What is amusing to me about this, we did this play in 2013, I want to say. And the person that she actually asked the question to is our current board chair at the ASC. And also he's a lawyer. So that last little line that she asked, what does the law say, was a particularly appropriate line for her to take to him. But what we saw happen was that when Rodney replied, tell him you love him, to her first question of what she should do, the audience responded quite enthusiastically. And it worked with what Allison was doing. And with the next few lines, it didn't stop the action, it only supported the action. So finally, we've come to activating, which is what just happened. He was asked, and she waited long enough for him to actually speak back. But we have another example of that as well. So this is when an actor pauses long enough or holds something out for an audience member to take, or in some other way requires action of an audience member. And there's a funny story that that happened in a production of Romeo and Juliet, in which our Mercutio would go and high five all of the gallants as he was preparing to battle Tybalt. And that high five is called allying, and that is great. So the student matinee audience, again, was all into it, and they all put up their hands, and he high-fived everyone until he got to the last one, at which point the kid put Skittles into his hand. So I guess he was asking for more like this kind of five. And then Ben realized that he couldn't fight with the Skittles in his hand, and he couldn't eat the Skittles because that would actually prevent him from saying the rest of his lines. So he had to do something. And at that moment, another actor on stage walked up, looked at his hand, held out his hand like, I want some Skittles. And Ben dumped the Skittles into that actor's hand, and he was able to go on with the scene. And the other actor just got a handful of Skittles, which he got to enjoy during the fight. So that is a moment when we get an unexpected problem and we have to solve it. And that happens when we're talking about audience members. And I kind of believe that that is a possibility in Shakespeare's theater as well, with all the fruit and everything that they had going on at these productions. So we're going to watch a scene from King Lear here, and you're going to hear an activation. You're going to see an activation, and you're going to hear the response to that activation. This is Edmund. He is the half brother of Edgar and the bastard son of Lear's close friend, and he has made two women fall in love with him who happen to be sisters. And so this is him thinking through what to do next.
To both these sisters have I sworn my love. Each jealous of the other as the stung are of the adder. Which of them shall I take? Both? One? Or neither?
Kill them both and take their money.
Neither can be enjoyed if both remain alive.
So we have this moment when, and I can tell you who said kill them both and take their money. It was one of the students in one of our programs who was, anyhow, he gave a quite unexpected response when Patrick activated the audience by putting his hand to his ear as if he needed to hear from them. But the lines still worked with this moment. So we again get even the most unusual response gives us success with playing with the audience. Let me see if I can get us back there. So finally, we do have the actual option of acting with our scene partners. And that is a really important part of course, any play that we are going to do. We don't want to ignore that as part of this experience of discovery of how the audience can be part of the show. But we do want to give credit when the possibility for activating an audience member or in some way engaging an audience member arises. And so if you are talking directly to another character, like Scratch My Head, Peace Blossom, that's clearly going to be a moment when we're not going to take it to the audience. It's not ignoring the audience, but it's putting the involvement into the periphery so that we can tell the story that we've come to tell. everything could be played this way, but we tend to think that the stakes are higher and the audience is more part of the program, more part of the show, and has a more interesting experience and understands the play better when we try to put them into the world of the play with us using these different tools that we've discussed. So we do want to make choices about them, but we don't necessarily want to rid the stage of all acting. We want to make sure that we're telling the story. But I want to ask you all, which one is this? How could you play this line? Is it acting? Is it assigning? Is it allying? Is it asking? This is at the beginning of Julius Caesar. We've got a festival happening. Flavius has come to punish the people who are experiencing the festival. It's also taking place in an open air theater at 2:00 in the afternoon when the Puritans are very angry at the people who are skipping work to come see a play. So as a person who is authoritative, Flavius could be mistaken for one of those folks. So what do you all think? You can unmute yourself or you can type it into the chat.
We have a couple of comments in the chat. Assigning,
Mm-hmm.
assigning and asking,
Mm-hmm.
assigning or asking. It certainly is a question.
Exactly. We've got this question here. And since we've got all of these people who are at this playhouse, and this is the very first scene, and we do know of instances in which authorities came to playhouses to arrest people, it could be that they think that this is an actual authority figure. And if Flavius plays into that and comes out and says, "Hence, home, you idle creatures, get you home," that wouldn't sound too different from the kinds of people that they did interact with. And then to ask, "Is this a holiday?" also gives another option. So we've got both the assigning and the "is this a holiday?" And as this scene goes on, he asks further and further questions about who are you? What do you do? And what are you doing here? And he can take each one of those to a different audience member so that it feels like the entire group is being accused of this negligence of their duties. And from that, we get a much different opening to Julius Caesar than what one might expect from having read it in 9th grade, or was it 10th grade, whenever you read it. You guys have made a choice. Well done. I think you've learned it. So this is another time that I just want to show you what possible options there are for thinking about how we play these different scenes that we are very familiar with. Many times this speech is cited as being a place where Shakespeare shows that he does understand the humanity of the Jewish faith, of the people who are in the Jewish faith. He asks questions. Shylock talks to the audience, perhaps. And I think that by playing it to the audience, we may have an opportunity to connect with Shakespeare in a different way and to connect with audiences in a different way. If we think about Shakespeare writing this for Shylock to actually talk to the people in the playhouse, then that is calling attention to the fact that even though the Jews were kicked out of England in the 13th century, this playwright, this actor portraying this character is not the reputation that they have taken on. It is instead someone who is present with them, who does have pain, who does hurt, who is a human. And so it can actually create moments where our audiences have to question their own beliefs and thoughts. And that's why I wanted to share this one with you, so that as you're imagining the audience being asked these questions, you could see what happens. So I am going to ask you to unmute yourselves, and I'm going to ask you to answer the questions out loud as I go through this, imagining that that might be a possibility. You don't have to answer all of them, but if you feel compelled to, say something. He hath disgraced me and hindered me 500,000, laughed at my losses, mocked my gains, scorned my nation, thwarted my bargains, cooled my friends, heated mine enemies. And what's his reason?
He's a bigot.
I am a Jew. Hath not a Jew eyes?
Yeah.
Hath not a Jew hands, organs, dimensions, senses, affections, passions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Fed with the same
Sure.
food, hurt with the same weapons, subject to the same diseases, healed by the same means, warmed and cooled by the same winter and summer as a Christian is?
Yes.
If you prick us, do we not bleed?
Of course.
If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? And
Yeah.
if you wrong us, shall we not revenge?
Oh
Don't,
no.
don't.
If
Take
we
an
are
eye
like
for an
you
eye.
in the rest, we will resemble you in that. If a Jew wrong a Christian, what is his humility?
Rachamin.
Revenge. If a Christian wrong a Jew, what should his sufferance be by Christian example?
Get his own medicine.
To turn the cheek.
Same.
The other cheek.
By revenge. The villainy you teach me, I will execute, and it shall go hard, but I will better the instruction. So well done, you all. Thanks for your responses. What I hope that that showed was that any response that you give can still work with the lines. It's up to the actor to bring it full circle so that the intonation, the pausing, the response can be to what was said. And we can change maybe hearts, minds, by bringing the audience into the conversation and not just letting them passively sit back and watch a great show. So that's my piece, everybody. Any questions? Oh, thank you. Thank you.